So let's move on.
So we've talked a little bit about variables, as we already saw in our example class. UnrealScript contains all sorts of normal variables that you'd see, like int, float, bool, and string. There are a couple key things, though, that you need to remember about variables in UnrealScript. And then this can get you into a lot of trouble if you're not paying close attention. You always need to use the var keyword when declaring new variables. Local variables must be specified with the local keyword, because variables by default are not local, even if they're put inside of a function in UnrealScript. Lastly, if you want to allow your variables access to the editor, if you want level designers, artists to be able to see your UnrealScript variables, you need to use the variable parentheses keywords, and this will make it visible in the Unreal editor. Now, something that will trip a lot of people up, and you just need to be careful about it, is that all of your variables need to be declared at either the top of your class or the top of the function in which they are scoped. This is just absolutely critical, and this is just a weird eccentricity of UnrealScript, but that's just what you got to do in order to make it work.
So functions are very similar to C++ and Java, just like we saw. You have to define a function when you declare it, unlike C++, where you can actually define functions separate from their declarations. In UnrealScript, the function declaration and the definition are one and the same. Make sure your functions start with the keyword function, and so that you can tell UnrealScript, I'm defining a function here. Also, you'll see that local variables have to start with the keyword local and must be declared at the top of the function, just like Andy said. Functions also have special keywords that can make them more useful. Final, in a base class, prevents subclasses from overriding this function. That way, if you don't want anything to override your special function, you put final. That keeps anyone else from overloading it. Super is how you call base class functions that have been overloaded. You say super dot and then the function name that you want to call. This is really important if you're overloading functions that you still need to call. So like if you're overloading a tick function and you still need to call that function every frame, go ahead and say super.tick at the top of that tick function that you overloaded. Static allows you to do C global functions in the way that you can't call static functions from outside of them, and then static functions can call other static functions. Simulated allows you to execute on client side without a server. So if you have a client and server model executing, and the client is separated from the server, then the client can execute that code, that function, in the same way. Pretty much you want to always use simulated unless you're only wanting code to run on a server. Event is like a function, but it allows C++ source code to call it. And you're not really going to use them, but you're going to see them a lot. And touch, bump, all these different events are called in the C++ underlying code. You also have special functions like general purpose functions. These are utility functions in a sense, where you can call like linear interpolate, cosine, sine, trigonometric functions, clamping variables, you can round variables, just all kinds of things that aren't really supported in other languages. And you also have support for vector utility and string utility functions, all the math functions. Just go check it out. There's a lot there that you can use, and it'll save you a lot of coding time. Also, another advanced feature of UnrealScript is the use of delegates. Delegates act like variables. You can pass them around. You create them like variables, except with the delegate keyword, not the var keyword. And this can reduce your code base a lot. In a sense, it's overloading several different functions and passing around the one you want to call at a given time. And it's a very advanced feature of UnrealScript, but we want to make it, known to you.
So, another feature that's really custom to UnrealScript and you won't see pretty much any place else is states. Now, state programming is a thing that many games have been tackling for a long time, and UnrealScript basically said, hey, we're going to give developers a really easy way to implement state machine-like logic for all in-game actors. So, I guess you might be asking, what is a state? What's the importance of a state? And a good example is an enemy AI that you might see in Unreal. Now, an enemy player, a bot, has a couple of different states, but if we want to sum it down, we could just break it down into two simple states, hunting and fighting. So hunting would be when the bot hasn't found a target yet, but it needs to search around the level, it's looking for pickups, it's looking for weapons, but it isn't doing any aggressive action yet. Now fighting might be a state that occurs when the bot encounters a player or another bot. And in this case, in this state, fighting, the bot would make decisions based on firing at that enemy or strafing to avoid projectiles. But basically, we're taking a concept, a complex concept like enemy AI, and we're breaking it into simpler parts, simpler states like hunting and fighting. So the state system lets us break down stuff and lets us handle complex topics much more easily. So, working with states, there's a couple really important facts that you need to know. An actor can only be in one state at a time. 2, when in a particular state, an actor will only execute code from that state. So if you have multiple states in your actor, like let's say back with our enemy AI example, and your enemy AI is running around, unless you put another running around function in your fighting state, as soon as he switches to his fighting state, he won't be running around anymore. You need to make sure that your code is duplicated, but this also helps from making your actors perform things that they shouldn't do when they're in a state, say, running after someone when they're supposed to be in a sleeping state. So, fact 3. States can have their own version of a function, allowing one function to perform different actions based on the actor's state. Now, this is very similar to delegates. It's also another thing that's very unique to the state system in Unreal. The fact that a function, you can call a function by its name, but then based on the state that that actor is in, the version of that function will be different. So if you can define a function with the same name and the same parameters multiple times within a class, as long as they're all in different states, and then when you call that function generically, it will call the version of that function that's in the particular state of the actor. Alright, so fact number 4. States can include time-based functions, known as latent functions, that take time to process. Now this is really important because of the fact that these time-based functions will halt the execution of a state's code. So if you set up a state, let's say for an enemy player to stop fighting when they get hit, or to take a break, like a 2-second lapse, and then return to their attacking mode, these latent functions are what would provide that functionality. So upon hit, you would run a sleep 2 seconds, and all code execution would stop for 2 seconds. Then you resume your code, and it would say, go back into your fighting state, and then your actor switches back into their new state. But this allows you a lot of control over the flow of your state code, even more so in-game. Our last fact that we need to look at is that actors contain a number of pre-built state-specific commands that allows them to control the flow of their state logic. This is really important just for when you're writing states, when you're building them. Unreal has provided you with a lot of tools such as labels, like go to state, and basically it's navigation tools for making sure that your code can flow inside of states to different places, can switch between states easily. All that stuff has been pre-built for you, so make sure when you're building states to find those functions and make full use of them. Alright, so that pretty much sums up what we're going to talk about on the Unreal Engine. Overall, we've gone over the structure of the Unreal Engine, where UnrealScript comes into play, the basic class structure of UnrealScript.
And then we've talked about making your own custom class, a very simple class, how it should extend from other classes. We've talked about variables and functions and how those tie into the UnrealScript and the Unreal Engine itself.
Lastly, we went into states and kind of how they'll help you build AI and build dynamic actors within your system. So now, you've started to build up a repository of knowledge, and so this is kind of your first step to getting familiar with how UnrealScript works, and soon enough, you'll be ready to start writing scripts of your own. Thanks for watching.